what the differences in trends in different regions do you see, and as well differences in regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start from the back first. So I think from a regulatory perspective, Asia is probably a little bit more hands-off than the US. But at the same time, I think just given some of the recent events that have occurred in the space, I think regulators here are also starting to tighten things up. And we see places like Singapore and Korea and Hong Kong sort of starting to put together a framework for regulations. And in terms of sort of the crypto ecosystem, out here, I think we've got a pretty vibrant ecosystem in Asia. I think the demographics of Asia sort of, in a way, helps that because we have so many young people out here, and so many people that have mobile phones and are very digitally savvy. And then secondly, if you think about the ethos of crypto, with the whole aspect of financial inclusion and all of those things, Asia probably has the most underdeveloped sort of financial system, and so with something like DeFi, obviously it creates more inclusiveness, and naturally Asia is sort of very well placed to do that. So I'm optimistic that we will see a lot of users coming from Asia, and that is also the reason why many of the projects, even if they're not from Asia, they're from the US or Europe, many of them recognize that Asia is an important market, right, and they need to be here. And that's also, where we come in, because we have a 40 people team now that's based in Asia, and we can help. We can work with many of these founders to help them with marketing, with community building, and so on and so forth. Just like we did with the Scroll event last night. And so, many of the founders, would like to partner with us just because of these value add that we can bring to their projects.
And what current trends in crypto do you see, and what projects will be popular in your mind in the next bull run or over the next years?
Yeah, I mean, we're still actively investing in DeFi, although I'd say the deal activity has slowed down. I think partly because quite a bit of the infrastructure has already been built out. And then on the sort of gaming and metaverse side, we're still seeing very robust deal flow. And I'm a firm believer that through gaming and through the metaverse, we're going to bring in a lot of new users into crypto. So we're trying to invest in the next generation games that will appeal to the current huge sort of gamer user base that's out there, because frankly the games that we've seen so far that exist and are available today frankly don't meet the threshold for what the real world gamers are used to, right? So we have to build games that are of that quality that will bring them into the ecosystem, and I'm hopeful that in the next 2 to 3 years those will start coming to market, and we're sort of trying to invest in them. And then the other area that I'm pretty excited about also is in the sports area. So we're starting to see a lot of activity there. So whether it's something like Sorare or Chili's, where they're sort of creating sort of a fantasy sports league, creating club tokens and things like that, we're starting to see quite a bit of interest there. And obviously 2022 is the year of the World Cup, so everyone's sort of very excited about that. We're also investors in a project called Fan Controlled Sports, which is basically trying to build an alternative sports league. And the first area that they've gone into is American football, so they're creating a real life league that is very different from the American sort of football league, because the traditional sports league has been around for decades, right? And there's been no innovation there, so they're trying to create a new format that is more exciting, that incorporates Web3 and NFTs, and it allows the users to actually be involved in the game, right? So the users get to decide what the name of their team is, they get to own the team, they get to pick the players, they get to draft the players, and they get to decide on the team strategy. So it creates massive engagement for the user base. And they've done 2 seasons now of Fan Control Sports, and the user engagement is just through the roof. and this year, they're going to start to launch hoops as well, kind of basketball, and and then beyond that, maybe going to baseball and other sports. So yeah, it's a space that I think is worth watching very closely.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. And what about NFTs? Like, they some kind of drop now, but still do you see a future for them? You will have a boat if yacht club,
Yeah.
as I see.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the earliest to invest in the NFT space, but the moment I started to dabble into it, I got it very quickly, and I understood the appeal of NFTs. Since I started collecting, I've built up a huge sort of collection myself, not just the Bored Ape Yacht Club, but many other PFP collections and one-of-ones. So I'm very optimistic about PFPs, and I think that sorry, not PFPs, but NFTs, and I think that ultimately NFTs are going to be as big, if not bigger, than the fungible token economy. And the reason is because PFPs can be used to represent anything, right? Ownership of land titles, ownership of music, ownership of obviously artwork, and these PFPs, which are now evolving to become almost like club memberships, right? So they can be used to represent so many different things, and I see a lot of enthusiasm in the space and a lot of new collectors coming in. So I'm definitely very optimistic that we will see the prices rebound, and we're already seeing a bit of that happening in the one-of-one space, right, where prices have now started to creep up again.
And can you share as well your investment criteria? How do you select whether to invest in this or that project or not?
You mean NFT projects?
No, just generally.
Just generally? Yeah. I mean, I think for early stage projects, the approach is very different for the hedge fund and for the venture fund, right? So in the venture fund, we're effectively investing in very early stage tech startups. And so what we look for is, number one, we look for very good teams, that have a good track record and experience in building what they're trying to build. The second thing that we analyze very deeply is we try to understand how big the market opportunity is, right? What we call TAM, and then we look at a competitive landscape to see whether they're the first mover in the space or there are other competitors already in the space. And if they are not the first mover, then we always ask ourselves the question of what do they bring to the space? How is the product differentiated versus the existing players that are already in the space? And then I guess the third thing that we look for is we try to understand the go-to-market strategy for these projects, because ultimately you can build a good product, but if you don't have a good go-to-market, you are not going to drive adoption, right? So there we focus a lot on the strategy, the partnerships, and oftentimes we also try to help these projects with partnerships because of the vast portfolio that we have, right? And then last but not least, we also look at valuation to see if it makes sense. So that's on the private side. On the public side, it's a little bit different because obviously all of these tokens are already traded. But what we do is we typically would cover about 500 to 600 tokens, and we track them actively. And so we look for developments, right, on the margin that may sort of change a project's trajectory or outlook. And then we basically look for these projects that we think are mispriced, right? If the market is, is not so optimistic about projects, but we think there's certain things that are happening that could, change its growth trajectory. Those are opportunities that we will basically go after.
So what project do you consider currently to be mispriced?
I wouldn't comment on specific projects, but I would say that obviously we're in crypto winter, right? And so most assets are trading closer to the low end of their historical valuation range than the high end, and that's a good starting point from a sort of high level perspective. We see a lot of projects that has a lot of traction today versus where they were maybe even 2 or 3 years ago. But where the token price is maybe back to where they were 3 years ago, right? And that disconnect doesn't make sense to us. So we're selectively looking into those opportunities. And we are also in discussions with some of the projects that have been around for a while, that have an existing treasury and they're looking to diversify the treasury, and where they may be willing to work with funds like us to be longer term holders of the project and be willing to sort of allow us to be involved with the project at more attractive terms.
And when do you expect the next bull market, and what will be the reason for the growth of the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not too far away from the bottom. Obviously it's impossible to pick the absolute bottom, but yeah, we don't think we're that far away. But I think the next few months are still going to be challenging, right? Because there's still quite a bit of uncertainty in the global macro, and while crypto is still a small asset class, it still gets affected in a global risk-off environment. So I think we're watching very closely the macro picture to see where the inflation inflection point could be, which might then change the narrative of the Fed. And I think we're it's not going to happen this year, but probably sometime next year. And then beyond that, obviously we're looking towards some of the other major catalysts, crypto-specific catalysts that could come. And one of it is obviously the Ethereum 2.0 scaling roadmap, where after the merge they have the other sort of 4 or 5 phases that are going to happen. I think each one of those phases is going to be a catalyst for Ethereum specifically, but also everything that's built on top of Ethereum, right? And then beyond that, in I guess May 2024, we have the Bitcoin halving again, right? And typically, when that happens, that is also another major catalyst for the space. So I think, as you can see, based on the various sort of catalysts that I've described, I certainly think that bull market, could start, possibly, within the next year or so. But we need to find a bottom first before that new cycle kicks off.
Yeah. And can you share as well some of your latest investments as a VC fund?
Yeah, absolutely. We have made a lot of investments. Obviously we were involved in the Spartan Labs latest round, Sui blockchain. We have been investing in layer ones for a very long time, and obviously this is another high-profile layer one project that is driven by a very knowledgeable, very strong team that has significant resources, and the protocol is also very close to being launched. So I think between Sui and Aptos, we think that will allow a new sort of group of players to come into the space, and new projects will start building on these two ecosystems. So Sui is one recent investment.
Did you invest in Aptos as well, or no?
We didn't invest in Aptos. Obviously, we try not to sort of invest in everything. We try to be selective, and the two projects are obviously very similar, and we had to sort of, we thought it made more sense for us to pick one versus the other. And we like both of them, but the reason we chose to work with Spartan Labs was because I think they're trying to, they're more focused on Asia for sure, right? And obviously we're out here, and we think we can work very closely with them to develop the Asia ecosystem. I think the second thing we like about the team is that they are very sort of focused on improving the UI and UX, and making blockchain generally more accessible to the mainstream and the masses, and that's something we talked about earlier. So those were really the two key reasons, in addition to sort of being excited about the team itself. So that's one recent project. The other one that I mentioned is Fan Control Sports, which we're very excited about, and we are in the process of also raising another round and bringing in new investors. And then I'd say the third project that we invested in recently is also Sweatpoint. So as you know, the sort of whole move to earn economy is something that has caught a lot of people's attention. And if you think about a project like Sweatcoin, I mean, they are a fitness app that has been around for about 4 years plus, really a Web2 app. But they have a massive user base. I mean, they now have about 140 million users, right? Which is bigger than all of the crypto users that we have today. And what they're essentially doing is, creating a Web3 wallet and allowing their existing users to port over and start earning crypto tokens as opposed to, sweat points, right? And so I think within their user base, there's a group of users that are crypto curious. And so far we've seen about 13 million users create, jump over, cross the chasm to move to crypto. And of course, you still have the other 130 million users that could eventually move over, right? And so that represents a big step change in terms of the number of people that we're bringing into crypto. And of course, they're not just stopping at this move to earn, right? I mean, this tokens that they're giving away to the users is really just almost like an onboarding incentive reward, right? But within the app itself, they're also allowing the users to stake the tokens, to lend it, to swap it, and things like that. So, so in a very short span of time, they will be able to bring allow the users to interact with tokens, but also do all these cool sort of DeFi stuff within their app. So so the token just went public recently, and I think it's up about 2.5x from where we invested. So we're pretty happy about it. Yeah.
And that's a great way of mass adoption, bringing existing users to the Web3.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other latest investments you can share with us?
I think those are the main ones. I mean, we have pretty, big portfolio. But I would say, follow us on on Twitter at BlackSpartan1, and we will be making some of the future announcements.
Yeah, thank you for interesting conversation and sharing your expertise and your investment with us.
Yeah, happy to, and really enjoy the conversation.